It's not something that comes for free or because we pay our fair share of taxes. Now you hear the communists say, I pay my taxes. What is wrong with this road? You know the taxes you pay, right now you don't pay a quarter. But we know here in America, a land of opportunity. A land wherein you can be whoever you want to be. Why so? Because the tools are in your hand. They are at your disposal. The point is, can we take them, utilize them, and move to the next level? Today, America sits close to number 30 in the world when it comes to academics. In the Tri-County area, I'm from Southwest Florida, so I don't know much about this area, but what I do understand, and I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got several schools out there. Several. Islamic schools, you've got over half a dozen. What makes this place where you're sitting tonight different from the rest? My goal tonight, next 10 minutes, is to give perspective on what I feel from this area. When I look behind me here, it says Islamic Foundation of South Florida, Sunrise, Florida. It is only in the darkness of night will one begin to anticipate the beauty of the sunrise. And the sun is going to rise from Florida, and it's not going to be just to prove itself here in the Tri-County area. We're here to prove for the rest of the nation, nay, the rest of the world. Why? Because your name, when you look at the name of this place, it's amazing. It's stems. So the people in the past sowed the seed, and it is now sprouting. The stems are forming. As Shair said, we have the path and a direction. So the seed was the direction, the path is in front of us. Where's the destination? Do we want an industry that just mass manufactures kids from K to 12 and sends them out in the world? Or do we want to produce kids who are the leaders of tomorrow? Now, if you want leaders from tomorrow, you don't have to go to a high-tech school, a university. You don't have to go to Cambridge, Harvard, or anywhere else. It can happen in the most remote places. When you look at people who made it high in this world today, they didn't make it from big schools, wealthy families, good structures, and good solid backgrounds. They made it through determination, dedication, and dreaming big. And that's what got them there. I want to take you all on a little journey. Let's go back to the first school in Islam. I'm not going to talk about Medina Munawwara. I want to go to a mountain which I had the honor to go up in 1995 for the first time, in the month of Ramadan. After Fajr, we left Makkah, we drove towards Ghar Hira. And you look at that mountain, you're like, can I climb that mountain? So my brother and I made the journey. Unfortunately, we went the wrong way. And it comes to a part of the mountain where it just kind of goes steep up. So we went around from there. So a 45-minute journey ended up being like an hour and a half. And we entered into a cave. A cave which is so narrow, yet it's serene. And when you sit in that spot, you can see the Kaaba. Who was the student in that cave? I can hear you. Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why did he go up there for days at a time? Because he was waiting for that first lesson. He was waiting for that direction. And we all know here, once he was gifted that direction and the prophethood with the first revelation, which was Iqra. Simple. A simple word, but behind it, it opened doors of benefit for the entire humanity. Ma ana biqari. Read. Can't read. Read. Can't read. Read in the name of your Lord who created. I see this is one lesson. If I miss that lesson, I'll catch up tomorrow. No, this was the most important lesson. And it's important because it was the first revelation. Hence, it holds due significance and importance. And that one lesson in that small school, through that one instructor, Angel Jibreel alayhi salam, moved him. It motivated him. It brought fear in him. He ran down to Khadija radiallahu anha and said, "Zammiluni, dathiruni, laqad khashitu ala nafsi." Cover me up, I think I'm dying here. What just happened to me? But no, that was the moment that became the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of love, depleting hatred, ignorance, and all false practices. It started from that one lesson. My dear brothers and sisters, growing up in Canada, we never had the facilities which are available today. So know that we've come a long way, but we have much further to go. So the unique part of this school here tonight, which you are sitting in which you have kids going to, or friends whose kids are participating in, this school will be nothing less but an institute and a program that will only produce leaders which will be global game changers, inshallah. 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 I want to hear from you, inshallah. Inshallah. Because the time is right and the moment is now. Muhammad ﷺ received the message when ignorance had reached its point. When people were so wrong, it couldn't get any worse. But it was only there to prove that what Allah gave to Muhammad Mustafa ﷺ changed the trends of society. Hence, what we all hold today will change the world. It can change the world. It has to change the world. What we're missing are those people who will be game changers. And inshallah, STEMS is going to produce and continue to produce game changers. Where are you going to put your money tonight? This is not just going to be an ordinary school. This is going to be a game changer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Again, you have rendered me speechless here tonight. I am amazed by what's happening here. I'm going to go to Cocoon and Port Charlotte, if you know where that is. Somewhere in the west coast there, the southwest coast of Florida, off the Gulf. But alhamdulillah, I'm honored to be here tonight with you all. Jazakumullah khairan for all that you have done and all that you will continue to do. Keep your heads high, be motivated, and continue to make the world a better place. Jazakumullah khair. Salaamu Alaikum.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
Jazakallah. Thank you for the amazing inspirational words. Shaykh Yasir Qadhi, PhD, is the Dean of Academic Affairs at Al-Maghrib Institute. He's one of the few people who has combined the traditional Eastern Islamic seminary education with the Western academic training of the study of Islam. Shaykh Yasir graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Houston, after which he was accepted as a student at the Islamic University of Medina. After completing a diploma in Arabic, he graduated with a BA from the College of Hadith and Islamic Sciences, and then completed a MA in Islamic Theology from the College of Dawah. He then returned to America and completed a PhD in Religious Studies from Yale University. He has authored several books, published academic articles, and appeared on numerous satellite and TV stations around the globe. His online videos are of the most important, most popular, and highly watched Islamic videos in English. Shaykh Yasir Qadhi is a resident scholar of the Memphis Islamic Center. He's also a professor at Rhodes College in the Department of Religious Studies. Wow. I'd now like to invite Shaykh Yasir Qadhi.
Salaamu Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala amma ba'd. We wouldn't be doing a Muslim event if we were on time, so alhamdulillah we are now beginning on standard time, so we're exactly on time as we should be. However, given the dynamics of the situation, I will cut back my talk. I was initially assigned 40 minutes, but obviously we have the fundraiser to do, and that is of course the reason why we are here. So I just wanted to share some thoughts with you, inshallah ta'ala, and then get to the main program, which is of course to help the school. Brothers and sisters, we are living at times now that, wallahi, we all need to take a step back and look at the broader picture. I always like to begin such talks with a brief illustration of some of the key points of the history of Islam and Muslims in America. Because I believe we're living at a very crucial, very interesting time. And it is very pertinent just to remind ourselves that Islam is not foreign to this land. That Muslims have an integral role. They've been here, maybe not as visibly, maybe not the numbers and quantities as we now see, but Islam has played a crucial role from the very beginning of this land. And we began with 1492, when Christopher Columbus, quote-unquote, discovered America. Of course, like every man, he got lost and he didn't want to ask for directions, so he thought he discovered India, hence they're called Indians, but still, he was the first European to come to America. Now, 1492, of course, is the famous date Christopher Columbus discovered America, but it was also the date that the last Muslim kingdom of Granada fell to the Reconquista, to the Spanish conquerors. And Muslims ruled Spain for 750 years, more than 750. And in 1492, it was the year that the last Nasrid kingdom of Granada fell to Ferdinand and Isabella. Now, I took a tour to Spain a few years ago, to Andalusia, and I read every book I could find. I read every book I could find about the history of the Umayyads, about the Ta'ifa dynasties, about this and that, and so I was well prepared, I thought, for the tour ahead. And I had a great time in Andalusia. And I went to one of the final stops. I only had 2 days left. I spent 8-9 days there. I went to the palace of the Nasrid kingdom that you must have seen this. It's the most beautiful icon of Muslim Spain. And as I was standing there with the tour guide, she said, and then she pointed, she said, and this is where Christopher Columbus stood when the last Khalifa handed over the keys of the city to Ferdinand and Isabella. And all of a sudden my mind started spinning around. Because of course, being who I was, I only did research on the Islamic side of things. And I stopped right at 1492. And I did not go beyond that. And it never occurred to me that of course 1492 is when Christopher Columbus also left the Spanish kingdom, Andalusia. And so I'm standing there, so wait, Christopher Columbus was standing right here when the Muslim Khalifa handed the key, and I saw the key myself, it's still there, the actual key is still over there, handed the key of the city to Ferdinand and Isabella, and she said, of course. He had been following Ferdinand and Isabella from Sevilla to so many other lands, each time begging them for money. Each time they would say, we have no money to give you for this far-fetched scheme of trying to discover a route to India because we need every penny to fight against the Muslims. We have no money for your weird ideas to go to India. We need to finance the war, the religious jihad against the Muslims. So he kept on hounding them 3 different times. And he then approached them after they had conquered the Nasrid kingdom of Granada. And he basically says to them, now what's your excuse? You've conquered all of the kingdoms, and now that they have the money of the Muslim Khilafah in their banks, because all of this is basically confiscated by them, so they decided to spend of that money to see if this weird, bizarre scheme of finding a passage to India to get spices so that they didn't have to buy from the Arabs and the Muslims, so they get it cheaper directly from the source. Let's see if we can finance this scheme. And therefore, Christopher Columbus literally financed his expedition from Muslim money. After Ferdinand and Isabella had conquered the kingdom. And so as she was telling the story, she said, and by the way, the place where Christopher Columbus stayed for 6-7 months, because the kingdom fell in the early part of 1492, and Christopher Columbus left mid-1492, and then came to, well, technically he didn't land in North America, he landed in the Caribbean islands, technically. Nonetheless, this part of the world was discovered. He landed in those islands at the end of 1492. Okay? So, the guy told me that if you travel an hour and a half away, there's actually the very house that Christopher Columbus lived in. It's a monastery. It was a place of monks. The very house that he lived in is still there, in its original structure. And you can see the relics and the desk and whatnot, it's still the exact same. For 500 years they preserved it. So obviously, being the patriotic American that I am, I said, "Khalas, I gotta change my plans. I have to go to this other site." This is too interesting. This was not a part of my vision because, as I said, I had not done the research of post-1492. I was only talking about the Muslim Khilafah, this and that. So I said, "Khalas, I gotta change my plan for today." So I had to rent a car. I drove all the way to this small little place called Rabia, and found this really small village right next to one of the tributaries that then leads into the Atlantic. So it's right next to the water, small little town. And I found there's only one site in the town that's a tourist site, that's the Christopher Columbus Museum, right? So I went to this museum, and very few people go because it's in a small little village, middle of nowhere. And I walked in, paid the ticket, and the lady there, she starts getting all excited when she sees me. She sees the beard, she sees the brown skin, and she starts speaking in Spanish. I said, "I'm from Texas, but no speak Spanish. Si habla Urdu, but no si habla Español." Okay? So she couldn't speak Urdu, she couldn't speak English. So she said, "You Muslim?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a Muslim. I'm a Muslim." So then she said, "This is a mosque. This is a mosque." And she's the girl that's selling the tickets, right? But she was so excited to see a Muslim, she went out of her booth, she took me inside, she became my tour guide. And she said, "Look, this is where the mihrab was." Now obviously I'm understanding this. This is where they used to pray. And I could see they had put the bricks over there. This was the minaret, they cut it off and put a cross on top, right? And what happened was that this place used to be a mosque. When the Christians conquered it, they converted it to a monastery. And when Christopher Columbus stayed there, it was therefore a mosque that had been converted into a monastery. And he stayed there for 6 months, and he basically, financed, he had the money, but basically figured out what he's going to do, hired the labor, and did all of that needed to be done, the logistical work, as he lived in that mosque/monastery. And she said even the city, Leila, it is the Arabic for Al-Rabita. Al-Rabita, which had then been converted to Leila. And you can find this on Google Maps. Leila, you'll find a small little village on the tributaries. And so this really shows us the interconnectedness. It began there. Of course, I'm not going to go into a long history of Islam in America. We've had Muslims come here from the very beginning. The first Muslim that we know came was a person by the name of Stephanios. And Stephanios from Mustafa. His name was Mustafa, and he was a Berber, an African Muslim, a doctor who had been captured, became a slave by the Portuguese, and then sent here as part of the Portuguese mission, and then he died in one of the expeditions against the Native Americans. They killed him. When they killed the Portuguese, they killed him as well. By the way, this also explains why so many American Muslims are doctors, because the very first immigrant was also a doctor. So that runs in the blood of American Islam. But the doctor, being the doctor, it has precedent. Don't worry, you're not alone here, right? 60% of us here have doctors, that's why. It goes back, it's all his fault. The first immigrant to America was actually a doctor. In any case, the point being, I don't want to go into all of the history. By and large, most of us should be familiar with the fact that we've had waves of immigrants. There were a few that came very early on, pre-colonial times. There was a group of Muslims living here during the founding of America. A group of Moroccans were here. We don't know what happened to them, by the way, but there was a group of Muslim Moroccans here. They met President Washington and others in the White House. And throughout the centuries, we've had histories, of course, the African Americans that came as slaves. The slaves that came here, 20% of them were Muslim, and we have authentic records of them writing Qur'ans. Some of them were lawyers, some of them were fuqaha, some of them were nobility. There was a famous movie done, was it 2 years ago, Prince Among Slaves, where a noble prince, i.e. a king basically, the son of a king, was captured and turned into a slave. That's all history that is well known. The fact of the matter is that we've never had the amount of immigration that has taken place in the last 40, 50 years of Muslims in America. The flourishing, if you like, really began in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And most of us in this audience, most of us, not all, most of us in this audience as well are either immigrants of that generation or children of immigrants of that generation. And this is where, for most of us, the history of Islam starts, even though the history of Islam in America goes back, as we said, 500 years to the very founding. And, I guess my own story is also somewhat typical. My father came to Houston, Texas in 1962. One of the first immigrant Muslims, one of the first Pakistani Muslims, and as was the case with all of those who came, the goal was to study and go back, right? But, as you know what happened, that never materialized. Not only did he continue to study, master's, decided to do a PhD, obviously gets married to my mother, brings her back here as well, I am born here as well, and so slowly but surely the vision changes, and he realizes he needs to build a masjid. So my father is one of the founders of the Islamic Society of Greater Houston back in the 60s, the very first masjid of Houston. He was one of the founders there. He didn't come to build a masjid. That wasn't his niyyah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a different vision, a different goal. He came to do his master's, then his PhD, and his goal was to go back. But Allah Azza wa Jal wanted Islam to flourish here. So He used people like this. He used these graduate students to start. My father started the first MSA. To this day, if you look at the constitution of the MSA, the original, back in the 60s, my father was there, 1967 or something like that, the first MSA in all of Texas, right? That's not why he came. He had no intention to build an Islamic center, but then children come along. I am born, and of course you need a Sunday school. So you start a Sunday school. I remember attending that Sunday school in the 70s. I clearly remember that we had this little, army shack type of thing. Those metallic huts, basically. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about, right? Those temporary houses. That's where we would have our Sunday school. And then you have to get an imam. And slowly but surely, Islam becomes a priority for him. He didn't come to make Islam his priority. That was not the reason why he came. But subhanallah, Allah had a different vision and a different plan. And I know this is also the case for many of you here, that when you came to this land, it wasn't that you had Islam as your priority. Maybe most of you were not even that religious. Maybe most of you were not that even interested in Islam. But then what happened? You realized, I need to preserve this Islam. I need to pass it down. And so you discovered real religiosity here in America and not back home. And this is one of those weird quirks, that in reality, a person becomes more religious over here. And slowly but surely, Islam begins to grow and flourish. My father tells me that he gave the first Eid khutbah ever in Houston, Texas, back in the 60s, and he tells me there were a grand total of 3 people. He was giving the khutbah, and 2 people were sitting there. Can you imagine the Eid khutbah? 3 people. He's giving the khutbah, and 2 people in front of him. This is the Eid of Houston, Texas. And subhanAllah, a few years ago, Allah blessed me to give the Eid in Houston, Texas. Allah blessed me to give the Eid prayer in Houston, Texas. In the National Convention Center. It's the largest convention center in Houston. That's where we usually have our Eid. And I would give the Eid khutbah there. And there weren't 3 people sitting there. There were over 30,000 people sitting there. And my father was sitting in the audience. And I said, this is the history and the story of Islam of North America. In one generation, From 3 people to 30,000 people. I am positive that my father and his generation could never have imagined the flourishing of Islam, the building of so many masajid, the building of so many Islamic schools. I am positive this would not even have come in their minds. And yet, subhanallah, this country gave that freedom. It encouraged that religiosity. It brought out the Islam from people who really didn't have that Islam. They didn't think they had it in them. They didn't come for that, but deep down inside they had it. And it brought it out from them. And alhamdulillah, we see the flourishing of Islam. We see these conventions that have 20,000 Muslims come. We see in every city, every single masjid has the best problem that any religious problem, any religious group can have, and that is their packed capacity. Wallahi, at a time when every other religion, churches and synagogues are wondering, what can we do to fill our seats, to bring people to our places? They're offering free perks and incentives. We are the only religious group that tells our people, look, if you come after 12:30, just go to another masjid, you won't find parking over here. We're the only group that turns people away, because without exception, every single masjid of North America is jam-packed come Friday. This is a positive thing, and we keep on developing more and more and more. So, brothers and sisters, I don't want to go on and on. I want to just tell you some positives and then some negatives. Positives about the future of Islam in North America. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. American Muslims, by and large, are of the most educated, the most integrated, the most part of the fabric of any Western country. I have traveled far and wide to many Western countries. And alhamdulillah, what I see in North America in terms of education, in terms of integration, in terms of being a part of society, there is no comparison. If anybody has been to France, to England, to Germany, you know the differences. You know the differences between the Muslims in those lands and the Muslims in America. We thank Allah for that. Also, alhamdulillah, our young men and women are rediscovering Islam with the passion, with the vigor, with the zeal that their forefathers did not have. Their forefathers did not have it. And our young men and women, alhamdulillah, by and large, they want to study Islam. They want to know what is this. So much so, I say, if you go to the Middle East and India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, you will not find the percentage of youth in the masjid over here. You will not find the percentage of young men and women in the masjid that you do over here. You go back home and it's only the very elderly. Haji Sahab, 60, 70 years old. That's it. Where are the youth? Where are the middle-aged? By and large, they're not there. Whereas you go to the masajid over here, you find the young, you find the middle, you find the old, you find everybody. This is what Islam is about, and we find it over here. We also, alhamdulillah, are solving many issues and problems as the second generation. By and large, ethnic differences are getting more and more. There were ethnic differences in the generation of our forefathers, between African Americans, between the immigrant, even within the immigrant, Pakistani versus Indian versus Bengali. But alhamdulillah, by and large, my generation, and then now we have the third generation. By and large, these differences are eroding. And inshallah, we're getting to the ummah of Islam. So these are positive. And inshallah, in that sense, the future is bright. But there are also negatives. There are also negatives that we need to be cognizant of and aware of. And of those negatives is that, of course, we have so many, but the top 2 or 3 that come to mind, of course, we do have the opposite issue as well. And that is many of our youth are leaving Islam. That is a reality as well. Many of our youth are simply discarding their religious identity. For every 1 or 2 that are here in the masjid, there are at least 3 or 5 or 7 that never come to the masjid. For every one that comes to an Islamic conference, at least 10 never step foot inside an Islamic conference. So let us be as well aware of the negative side. I, as a person who travels and interacts with people, can tell you a lot of horror stories of our young men and women leaving the faith. Not interested in Islam or in religion. They become agnostic.